Amen. All right, well, thanks for being with us again. It's great to have you, whether you're here, hanging out with us in the room, you're watching online, you're listening later, whether you're like running or driving or wherever you might be. We're just glad that you took time to spend worship and learning with us today. If we have not met, you and I, my name's Corey, and I have the honor and privilege of being lead pastor here at GFC, and we have been walking all the way through this summer in a series called Walk Wise. This is the last Sunday. So we've spent about 10 or so Sundays. We've been investing in the book of Proverbs and kind of trying to dig through and understand what Solomon is trying to teach us and how we take wisdom that was from God to Solomon and we say, we've got this knowledge thousands of years later, but it can be applicable to us today. And so we've gone through different topics and different things to kind of work through and say, how do we put this to use? One of the things that I want to always be true at GFC, but especially with this topic and kind of this book, is that we don't just have a conversation about it and then forget it. We can have conversations about a lot of different things that have no bearing and we can never actually change, right? If we were to get together and just start to have a conversation, you might start to talk about the weather. That just seems to be the place it goes. And we talk about how, oh, it's been so nice. It hasn't been so hot. It's been a nice August and we can do all this, whatever. We can talk about that forever. How much we talk about it doesn't change the weather, and it doesn't really mean anything. We can get together, we could talk about all the sports teams and what they should do and how they shouldn't do and what trades they should make and all that stuff, but guess what? We're not the GM, we're not the coach, we're probably not getting on the field. We can't change it. But what we can do is when we look at this information, we look at Scripture and particularly Proverbs and just allow that to kind of filtrate through our lives, we can keep this wisdom at the forefront of our mind and help us make decisions and help make us more like Jesus. And so I hope this is something that you will come back to. If you missed a week or two or something, you can always go back and find it wherever you get your podcasts and everything. And I had someone come up to me last week, and I've heard this before, and if you haven't heard this, I think this is a great practice. If you didn't know, there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. There's 31 days in most months, okay? I know sometimes have 30, and there's February gets in there and all that stuff, right? But that means you can read a proverb a day and just start over every month. And it's a good way just to kind of keep this stuff in front of us and keep just processing it through our minds and our hearts as we think this through. But we're going to settle Proverbs today, and then next week we'll move back into 1 Peter, and then we've got some fun things planned for the fall. We're already thinking about fall and going that direction, so I'm excited where we're going to go, but we'll take care of today first. So as we wrap this up, we're going to talk about something, a couple of things. We're going to talk about discipline and correction. I know those are our favorite things to talk about when it comes to Scripture, but we're going to process it through. And really what we're going to try and do is take this information and say, how do we then apply it to make sure the rest of what we talked about actually gets into our lives and we actually see it through. I want to start with a question, though, and I want you just to kind of process this in your own heart and mind. The question is this: have you ever tried to achieve perfection? Have you ever tried to achieve perfection? In some areas of life, you're never going to be able to do this. Right? You're never going to be a perfect person. You're never going to be a perfect spouse. You're never going to be a perfect kid. You're never going to be perfect anything. But I know that there are some of us that would call ourselves or be called by other people perfectionists, right? And we can get kind of stuck on something maybe and like we have to make it as best as it could possibly be. There's others of us that kind of get it to the point where like, okay, we can get across the finish line. It's good enough. It works. We can do it. And we kind of let it go. But there's times where we might try to be perfect. And there's some areas of life where you can be perfect or you could possibly achieve perfection. We probably have everyone in this room has probably picked up a bowling ball at some point and rolled it down an alley. Right? If you haven't, you should try it. It's pretty fun, okay? So we've probably all done this. Has anyone ever bowled a 300? I was hoping Chase would raise his hand. One day, buddy, you'll get there. Chase bowls for Garden Spot, so he's a good bowler. No one's done it, but it's possible, right? We've seen it done. That somebody can bowl a strike every time for the whole game and come up with a 300. You can pitch a perfect game, right? If you don't know what that is, it's a baseball pitcher can face 27 batters. They come up, they go down. There's no hits. There's no walks. He faces just 27. There's only been like 20 to 25 in Major League history, okay? It doesn't happen often, but it happens. Every once in a while, you'll see it. So there are areas of life where you could be perfect. Maybe some of us have a perfect driving record. That would be impressive too, right? So all of that kind of stuff. There are areas where you can be perfect, but the likelihood is not there. But when we think about those things and think about perfection that way, here's what I think is true. Rarely do we expect perfection without mistakes. Now, here's what I mean by that. The person who's bowled a 300 didn't start bowling 300s from the first time they picked up a bowling ball. They picked up a bowling ball and they were terrible. They probably even used that little thing where you just roll it down and it just goes down, like the little kids use, you know what I mean? Maybe some of us still use them. But you just roll it down and it just goes. They started that way. They threw gutter balls, they missed, they whatever. But eventually they got there. Like I said, pitchers that have thrown a perfect game, not every game is perfect. So they threw a lot of bad pitches. They've given up home runs other games. They've lost other games, and yet they've come up in some ways and they've been able to achieve perfection. But we don't expect them to get there without having mistakes in their past. We don't expect them to get there without having learned from doing things the wrong way or making a mistake and eventually getting there. But here's what I think can happen sometimes when we think about wisdom. That too often we desire wisdom without correction. That we just want to get it right without someone telling us we were wrong. We want to get it right the first time and make sure it's good and perfect. And we never want to have somebody come along and say you did it wrong or you need to change or that's not right or you went the wrong way, because it makes us feel bad. It makes us, maybe we're ashamed or maybe we're frustrated or maybe we just don't want to feel like we made a mistake. But the reality is, if we're going to understand this and really achieve and pursue wisdom, we have to allow correction to be part of the process. We have to be willing to say, when I go the wrong way, when I do the wrong thing, I'm actually going to allow people to come alongside me and correct me and move me in the right direction, or I'm going to allow the Word of God to come alongside me and correct me and move me in the right direction, or else I'm going to go the wrong way. So we're going to dive into that idea today. If you want to follow along with us on the website, you can scan the QR code that's going to come up on the screen here, take you to our website. All the verses and all the notes we're going to talk about today will be there. You can follow along on your phone or tablet if you'd like to, but everything will be up on the screen for you as well. We're going to start in Proverbs 3. And we actually started in Proverbs 3 last week. We started Proverbs 3, verses 9 and 10. Well, we're just going to go to verses 11 and 12. So we're going to kind of pick up the trail a little bit from where we were last week. So Proverbs 3, verses 11 and 12 says this: "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." So when we started this conversation in Proverbs, we talked about these people that were present. There's wise people that Solomon talks about. There's foolish people. And he creates these dichotomies between this is what's right, this is what's wrong. This is the way a fool would act, this is the way a wise person would act. And he leans into this, and sometimes he speaks as though he's talking to his children. He says, don't reject the Lord's discipline. How many of us, if we had the opportunity, if we knew discipline or correction was coming, we would run the other way? We'd say, I actually don't want to experience that. I don't want to get in trouble. But he says, hey, welcome it. It says, don't be upset when he corrects you. When someone comes along, especially God, and he says, you need to go a different direction, don't reject that. Don't be upset about it. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights. Listen, we have to get this in our framework. We do not think this way, and our culture doesn't think this way. But correction is a sign of love. When we come alongside somebody, if you think about it, you're like, you can see the whole picture. You understand things a little bit further along, whether you're dealing with a kid or just someone who's new to a certain situation. And you come along and you say, let me help you out. Let me make sure you know what's going on. Let me make sure you don't go away or pick up something or play with something that's going to hurt you. It's because you love them. But at some point along the way, we grow up, we become adults, and all of a sudden when people come and correct us, we see it as a sign of they're attacking us, or they don't like us, or they want to get after us. But the reality is that when someone lovingly corrects us, and we'll talk about what that means a little bit later, that it's actually a sign of love. And I think that this is always the case, that correction from a knowledgeable person should always be welcomed. One of the things I've tried to weave in and kind of talk about through this conversation is there's a lot of talk, and today there'll be a lot of talk, of getting information, getting correction from other people, having people come alongside us and talk to us, that kind of thing. We also have to kind of evaluate where it's coming from, right? We can't just take anybody and everybody's information and say they're right all of a sudden because they write a blog post or they write a book or they have a website, and all of a sudden now I need to take to heart everything they say. We have to process that and understand. But one of the things that should always be true is that correction from a knowledgeable person should be welcomed. If someone's coming along and having a conversation with us and they've been there, they understand it, they worked through it, they've walked through that path of life, we should be ready and willing to listen to them. And I think that this is true, that only a fool wants to continue in the wrong direction when correct directions are available to them. We don't get into this situation much anymore. At least I don't think so much. But because it's kind of hard to get lost anymore. Well, you can get lost, but it's easier to become unlost, right? Because even if you realize you're wrong, what do you need to do? You just kind of pull out your phone, get on Google Maps, get on Waze, whatever, and you're like, okay, I'll figure this out. Even if you don't have great reception where you are, you're just like, I'll just drive until I get good reception, and then I can pretty much figure it out. But as I was thinking about this, I thought back to when I started driving, and we used to have to, if I needed to go somewhere, I didn't know how to get there, I would have to get the address, I'd go home, I'd get on my parents' computer, and I would go to MapQuest. Anyone else do that? Okay, handful. And you would print out the directions, right? And then by the way, I know that we shouldn't be on our phones while we're driving and all this stuff, because it does drive me nuts when people are like driving and they're like this. And I'm like, this is dumb. Don't do that, right? You're going to hurt somebody, you're going to hurt somebody else. But we were printing books and trying to read them as we were driving, right? Because if you had multiple pages of directions, you had to like flip to the next page or figure it out. Or I remember sitting in the back of the van when we would drive to Florida when I was a kid, and we had this big old atlas, and that's how I knew where we were. I would literally be tracking, like, okay, we went across this place and like looking for this river and all this stuff. Like, did someone really, like, while they were driving years ago, they had an atlas and they were like, this is how I have to figure, like, that had to be way worse than just being on your phone while you're driving. I don't know. So you get in these situations where you can get lost. And I remember particularly, we got lost when I was in college. We went to a music festival that was in New Jersey, because my school was pretty close to New Jersey. And so we drive over there. And anytime I went to New Jersey, because I had friends that lived in New Jersey, we would go over there. I didn't want to pay the toll that you have to pay to come back from New Jersey, okay? So I would find a roundabout way to try and do it. Now, I probably wasted more gas trying to find my way around it than just paying the $1 or $2 that I had to pay. But I remember I was trying to get back, and we got lost, and it was annoying. And I was the one driving. I was frustrated. My friends are all having a great time. They thought it was really funny, and they're like, oh, we'll figure it out. I hated it. I was so frustrated. I just remember being lost. And in those moments, when we got into those situations, right, if you were ever there like I was, you had a few choices to make. You could either just turn around and hope if you went back the opposite direction, you could pick up the trail, or you'd come across a road that you're like, oh, this is where I was supposed to go right, and I went left or whatever. You could just keep driving and hope you figured it out. You could stop at the shady gas station and like ask, right, and be like, do you know how to get to where I'm going, and see what they say. And usually if you had multiple people in the car, they all had a different opinion, right, on what you should do. So that's a whole conversation that's happening. And so you have to decide what you should do. But here's what I know. None of us, if we knew that there was someone that could tell us where to go and what to do, would we continue in the wrong direction. We would say, please help me. If we're really lost, if we really don't know where we're going and what to do, and someone said, I know exactly where you are, I know exactly how to get to where you need to go. You need to go down here, turn left, this will take you to whatever route, and then you get on it, and then you're good. You'd be like, thank you. Right? We'd have this weight lifted off of us where we could feel like, okay, now I understand where I'm going. I know how to get there, and I'm not lost anymore. This is the idea of correction that needs to come into our lives. That when someone, whether it's a person that we know and trust and love, and they know and trust and love us, or it's God's word, and it comes along and says, you're going the wrong way. You should turn around. You should go this different direction. There should be this overwhelming thankfulness, just like we were lost and someone told us the correct direction to go. Proverbs 13:24 would say it a little bit of a different way. This can be a famous passage when it comes to raising kids. Proverbs 13:24 says this: those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Now, for some of us, we might have like PTSD when it comes to this verse, right? Or we're thinking it through, like, what does this mean and how does this work and all this stuff. We're not going to focus on the exact application of this verse, but we're going to think about the spirit behind it, okay? There are many different ways to discipline kids and to process and to help them understand where to go and what's the right path. There are many different ways to interact, and different kids respond to different things. That's just the reality. And so how we do that should depend on who you are as a parent, and it should depend on how your kid responds to the correction you are giving them. But here's what we know, is that those who love their kids do discipline them. Those who love their kids say to them, when you're doing something wrong, I'm going to correct you and point you in the right direction. Now here's what I also know, and I just want to say this like flat out, because we're in the trenches with any parent that's out there in the trenches as well, is that correcting children is exhausting. It's a full-time job. It's over and over and over again. And what's real, I realized this when I became a parent. I was like, I don't even know that I know how to be a human yet, and now I have to teach another human how to be a human, right? You're all of a sudden responsible, and you've got to figure out what to do and what not to do, and how do you correct different things, and how do they throw a curveball at you you've never had to deal with when you were a kid or your siblings were, and you've got to figure out. It's exhausting, right? But at some level, we have to kind of dig in and say, we're going to be disciplined as well. I heard this quote recently, and it was a quote that someone gave me this quote, and they had passed it down. So I don't know who to attribute it to anymore, but it was this general idea. This was the idea. He said, children are led by feelings. Adults are led by commitments. And you think about that for a minute. And I said a few weeks ago, you do not have to guess how a toddler is feeling, because they will tell you, and it will be clear. They'll yell, they'll scream, they'll laugh, they'll cry, all of it, right? You don't have to figure out. They are led by their feelings, and what they feel is going to come out, and it's going to make the decision for them. If they're mad, they're going to throw the thing, they're going to stomp around. If they're happy, they're going to do it again, and if you don't let them do it again, they're going to cry because now they're mad at you, right? It's easy math. But when we get older, when we get to be adults, the thing that leads us should not be our feelings. It should be the commitment we've made. And if we are followers of Jesus, that commitment needs to be our commitment to following Jesus and to say, I'm going to do this and make sure I continue down this path because I see the end result. This is also true when you start a job somewhere. Most of the time, if you start a job somewhere, there's probably some sort of contract. And that contract says you're going to do X, Y, and Z things, and they're going to pay you X, Y, and Z money. Now, if you break that commitment, like you just don't want to get up in the morning, so you don't, right? That contract's going to fall apart. You're going to lose that job, or that's going to be a problem. The same thing happens when you buy a home, or you even just sign a lease for an apartment, right? You usually sign a contract. You're going to pay X amount of dollars, and you get to live somewhere, right? And we make sure that we do those things to keep the commitment because we know this is what we're supposed to do. You do the same thing. It's a little bit different, but when you get married, you make a commitment. You do sign on the marriage license and all this stuff, right? It's a commitment that you make. And you say, if you do this right, if you're going to uphold the commitment correctly, in all three of those situations, you're going to show up. You're going to be at work on time, and you're going to be ready to work. You're going to pay the amount that you owe on your mortgage or your rent, and then the result is you get a place to live. You're going to show up, and you're going to be there for your spouse, and you're going to put them first, and you're going to make sure you're serving them, and you're going to make sure that they're taken care of because you made a commitment. And so you're led by those commitments, not by how we feel. Because here's what's true. If I don't feel like, or you don't feel like getting up and going to work the next day, and we just don't do that for a while, then the commitment that we made on the house or the apartment we have is also going to be affected. Because we're not going to have the money to pay for that. So we make decisions based on our commitments when we are adults, and we're helping our kids know and understand that. And listen, parents, this is what I think is so true, and this is what I want us to grab from this, is that parents, we need to be disciplined in correcting our children. I totally understand the days when we get through with whatever we're having to do, and kids are upset about stuff, and we just want to say yes because it's easier. Because we don't want to have the fight. Because we're tired. Because we just want to go to sleep or just not deal with anything. I get that. But we have to be disciplined in correcting our kids because it's the way that we love them. And we'll see in a little bit what the scriptures will say about what that turns out to be in the future. But we have to be willing to connect on that. And if you're not a parent yet, or you're beyond that stage, if you're beyond that stage or you have like grandkids, help the parents, please. I'm begging you for our sake, okay? And if you aren't a parent yet, think through this. Understand the information and the wisdom that's in Proverbs, even before you get to that stage of life, and be willing to put it to practice. Continuing a little further along in Proverbs. Proverbs 19, verse 20 says this. It says, get all the advice and instruction you can, so you will be wise the rest of your life. Some people function this way. Some people really enjoyed when we were in school and they said group project. We're like, great, that means I don't have to do all the work. And if you were smart, you knew who to pick who would do a bunch of the work, right? That was just me? Okay. You knew who to pick. Some of us, we heard group project and you were like, that's the worst. Because you would rather do it on your own. You didn't want to have to deal with the other people in your class. And maybe you were the kind of person that was like, I'll just do it. Everybody shut up. I'll just make sure it gets done, right? Sometimes we function in a way, certain people function in a way where we want the information and we want teamwork and we want all those things. Sometimes we're like, I just want to do it by myself. Here's all I'm saying the Proverbs says, is that we should get all the advice and instruction we can so we'll be wise for the rest of our life. This also means that there's not a finish line to this. I think I said this at the beginning of the conversation in Proverbs. There is not a finish line of good, now I'm wise and I don't need any more wisdom. There are those of us in this room who are much wiser than the other people, but there's still wisdom for you to gain. Some from the people that are younger than you, but some from people that are still older than you, some from people that are just in different walks of life than you. There's always wisdom to be gained. And so we have to welcome wisdom. I don't use exclamation points a lot on my slides, but I did for this one. It's just very simple. Ask for as much correction as you can. Along the way in the process, maybe you've had an experience like this, where you had a project at work, or maybe you were in school and you did a project or you completed the assignment and you were done. And your boss or your teacher looked at you and went, you did the wrong thing. Like, I thought I was right the whole time. And they go, no, you didn't listen to instructions, or you missed a class one day, or you missed this one thing I said, and then we went to, or you didn't read the email, or you missed the text message, and now all of a sudden it's different. Whereas if we have the conversation along the way, like there's those touch points, those check-in points. Are we going the right direction? Is this the way that we want it to go? Is this how you want it done? It's frustrating because sometimes we don't want to welcome that information in. We kind of just want to go on autopilot and hope we get it right. But in reality, even what Proverbs says is that we should ask for as much correction as we can. Listen, I think that this is true, that wise people aren't afraid of being wrong. It can be easy to be afraid of being wrong. You don't want to be the one who gets singled out for being wrong. You don't want to be the one who made the mistake. You don't want to be the one who has to be corrected. It can be embarrassing, especially if it's in front of other people. It can be frustrating because you thought you were doing it right and then you're doing it wrong. You don't want to carry that shame of just being wrong. It's frustrating. But I think ultimately, if we're wise people, we have to get to the point where we're actually not afraid of being wrong, but we are afraid of one thing, and this is what we're afraid of. That wise people are afraid of thinking they're right when they're actually wrong. Wise people welcome in the correction. So when they don't see the whole picture, when they don't realize and know all the information, and someone comes along and says, I have better information for you, I have newer information for you, I have a help for you, we would say, oh good, I don't want to continue in the wrong direction if I need to change. And that's when it changes from, we're not frustrated in those moments, we're not upset in those moments, but it's that weight lifted and we feel like this is good because now someone has lovingly come alongside us and said they're going to help us in the correct direction. Proverbs 29, verses 17 and 18 lays it out this way. It goes back to the discipline and correction of children idea. It says, discipline your children in verse 17, and they will give you peace of mind and will make your heart glad. Then 18 says, when people do not accept divine guidance, they run wild, but whoever obeys the law is joyful. That's not me having an idea. I don't know what that sound is, but it's kind of sounded that way. That would be really funny, though. Don't you wish sometimes that would happen? Like when you have a really good idea, it would just like, ba-ding, like it would just like go off in your brain. It'd be kind of fun. So it goes back, discipline your children, and they will give you peace of mind and will make your heart glad. And then it says, when people don't accept divine guidance, they run wild. But whoever obeys the law is joyful. Now that feels different, right? There's probably times where we do obey the law and it brings us joy. Like we are happy to follow rules, or we're happy at least that other people follow rules that affect us, right? But it's interesting when people don't accept divine guidance. Just think about that. When people don't listen to the word of God is another way to say that. They run wild. They go into all different kinds of things. They're all over the place. They're going all different. And it's interesting that just before that is this conversation about children. It says the people that children that are disciplined, it says they will give you peace of mind and they will make your heart glad. There's two ideas in these verses, or two words that I want to key in on, because I think they're the things that all of us are looking for at some level. Whether we know Jesus or not, we're all looking for peace and joy. Like if we could bottle up peace and joy, everyone would be in favor of that. If you could have peace all the time, there's no more anxiety, there's no more fear, there's no more freaking out, you're just at peace. And then it's just joy, right? There's no sorrow, there's no sadness, we're just joyful. If we could have peace and joy all the time, it's what people chase. It's what people that know Jesus chase and people that don't know Jesus chase. They go after all of these things. We go after all these things because we want to try and find a place where there's peace and joy. What we're looking at in Proverbs is saying, I've got it. God says, this is how you get it. The wisdom that I'm offering you is going to produce it for you. And I would say it this way, that if you want peace and joy later, be disciplined now. It's just a reverse engineering of the situation. If you're in a situation now that is not peaceful and joyful, it's partially because you made decisions, or I made decisions, that have led to that space. Now, sometimes they're out of our control, right? There are certain things that happen in life we can't control. It just happens, and it's of no fault of our own. But the things that are connected to the decisions we've made, if we've put ourselves in a place where there's not peace and there's not joy, it's because of the decisions we did or didn't make previously. And so the answer is, if we want that in the future, if we want to move in that direction, we need to make sure that we're disciplined now to create peace and joy later. By the way, this is not just something that's true for us. In fact, it's interesting. It says if you discipline your children, you will have peace and joy later. When we are people of discipline, it creates peace and joy for our parents, because they can look at who we've become and say, I don't have to worry about them, right? They have a good relationship there. They love Jesus. We make sure it's good. And by the way, when we are people of discipline, it affects our kids. They see what we're doing. They see what we're going through. It's very interesting to me, the conversations that, because our kids have been in elementary school and they kind of have conversations with different people, the stuff that they come home and they ask us based on what other kids are telling them about their parents' marriage. Like, if we don't think our kids are observing what's going on in our household and understanding, we're totally missing it. But when we are people of discipline, as parents, we pass that on and we give peace and joy to our kids because they know what to understand and what to process and how to read what's going on. So this isn't just for us. And I want us to get this because this is not an easy thing we're talking about, but I think I want to call this out and make sure we don't think through this way. That the joy of discipline actually lasts longer than the excitement of rebellion. Discipline and joy don't seem to go in the same sentence, right? Especially if, depending on the context you're in. You're like, I actually don't want to be that disciplined. I don't want to eat right. I don't want to work out. I don't want to be disciplined. I don't want that to be the case, right? It doesn't sound fun, actually. But the joy of that's going to be the peace and joy that comes later. We have, and this happens in all the time, we will romanticize rebellion. It feels good to do something bad every once in a while. It feels good to get out of the box and do something. You've been told not to do it for so long. It feels so good, right? You just want to do that and whatever. And we will romanticize this idea that sticking it to the man or whatever is a good thing. But here's what I've found out in those situations and observed in those situations. It lasts for like that amount of time, and then it's over and it's done, and there is no joy in it. It's not that fun anymore. It felt fun when you did it, and then if you didn't get caught, it's like, great, I didn't get caught. And that's the joy of it. Or you do get caught, and you're like, well, that was a waste of time, right? But when we're disciplined and we live in that space, the joy and the peace come later because of the decisions we make now. And the question is, are we going to allow God to help us make those decisions or not? This creates a bit of a tension. Because when we add God into the equation, especially on this conversation, because there's plenty of people that don't follow Jesus that are disciplined people. They've pursued their bodybuilding or their athleticism or their business, and they had to be disciplined in those spaces because they wanted to build something, and they've been successful, and that has required discipline in especially certain specific areas of life. But then we add God into the picture, and sometimes when that happens, we can become a little bit like little kids again. And we think, well, if I just do what's right, then everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be right. God's just going to give me everything I ever wanted. The reality is that isn't the case. And I think that we have to kind of perceive it this way, that God loves us enough not to give us what we want when we want it. This goes back to the idea of parents being disciplined and correcting our children. We need to know when to say no, and we need to be able to do that well. And that's actually an attribute of God. And if you've been a follower of Jesus long enough, you might be able to think back on times where you actually prayed for something and God didn't give it to you. And now you look back on that years later and you're like, actually, I'm really glad God didn't give that to me, right? I'm glad he didn't listen to me in that case because I didn't know what was going on. Sometimes he loves us enough. By the way, sometimes God says no. Sometimes he just says not yet. And there's like, it's coming. You're just not ready for it yet. Or it's just not your time yet. But he loves us enough not to give it to us right in that moment. And in that way, he's correcting us. He's disciplining us a little bit. But we have to be willing to help that. But this is what I do know. That he will give us what we need when we need it. God will not withhold what we need when we need it. He will show up in those moments. He doesn't keep things from us just because he wants to keep things from us. He will give it to us when we need it. The question is whether we trust him. All right, here's what I want to do with the last few minutes we've got. I really want to kind of put this into how do we process this and how do we live this out. I came up with, and if I stole this from somebody, I just don't know. I came up with an idea of what I believe a good definition for discipline is, especially when we process it this way. This would be my definition. If I stole it, I did it unconsciously. Didn't even know. So this is my idea. Discipline is a consistent commitment to difficult actions for a desired outcome. Discipline is a consistent commitment to difficult actions for a desired outcome. Whenever you have a conversation about discipline, it's never easy. In fact, easy things usually aren't disciplined things. It's usually the hard stuff that we have to commit to and do over and over and over again and be persistent in to actually achieve something worth achieving. And so when we think about this, we take all of what we've looked at through Proverbs and say, how do I do this well? How do I take the difficult things that it says? How do I make sure I'm following God in those difficult seasons of life or just difficult daily decisions I have to make in order to achieve the desired outcome? Well, the first thing we have to do is we actually have to define the desired outcome. This might seem a little bit like a downer or something like that, but I think it's just real. I want us to kind of know and understand this, right? There's something that's true of everyone that's in this room, and one day we're going to die. Right? It's just going to happen. It's a reality of life, right? No shockers to anybody there. But here's what happens, and I've seen this a lot just as a pastor, going to funerals, experiencing funerals, all that kind of stuff. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to die, and there's going to be a funeral, and then there's probably going to be a lunch where we sit around and eat chicken and potato salad, and we talk about you. Am I wrong? No, this is what happens, right? The question is, what are people going to say? And are they going to have to lie when they say it? What do you want people to say? It's the question. Your desired outcome should be what you want people to say when you're gone. That's the question. And if people are going to sit around and they're going to say how amazing and wonderful and great and what a blessing you are, that's going to depend on the decisions you make while you're alive. And how much discipline you had to point yourself in the right direction towards Jesus and to point other people in the direction towards Jesus. And if we don't live that way, we don't know what they're going to say. We don't know what the conversation's going to be. So what's the desired outcome? How do you make sure you live in a way that you've achieved the desired outcome when you're gone? This is one of the ways I think we do it. We have to invite wisdom into our lives through the wisdom of others. We find people that are more knowledgeable. We find people that are further down the road in life. We find people who love Jesus and love us, and we say, please speak wisdom into my life. If you see something and you think it's off and you think it's wrong or you think there's a problem, please come talk to me. I have a friend named Eric Miller. Some of you have met him. And he At one point, I think his sister, I don't know the complete story, but I'll get there. His sister is a part of a Christian singles group on Facebook that she started, and there's like 8,000 people in it, okay? And so at one point, Eric, because he was a former pastor, he went and spoke at this, at a conference for them or a weekend retreat they had or whatever. He's married, has 2 children, okay? But they included him in the Facebook group. Well, somebody that works with him didn't know that it's his sister that ran the group. So one day, this coworker comes to Eric, and she goes, Eric, I really have to talk to you about something. And he's like, oh, okay, where's this going? And so she goes, why are you in a Christian singles group? And he goes, oh, my word. Because she knows his wife, she knows his kids. She's like thinking he's in a Christian singles group to find a girlfriend or something, right? He's like, thank you for saying something. It's my sister's group. It's this. It's that. She's like, oh, my goodness, thank you. Because she was so worried. She was going to have to go tell Bethany, and she was going to have to whatever. It's like this whole thing, right? It ended up being nothing. But for a minute there, it was real awkward, right? But Eric was happy because she was willing to come alongside and say, Eric, what's going on? Right? She didn't see it, look the other way, and go, ooh, I don't know what's going on there, but I don't want any part of it, right? She said, I'm going to go lovingly talk to my friend and say, how do I help? Those are the kinds of people that we need to surround ourselves with and invite into our lives so that they'll correct us when we're wrong. Even in the times where we're not wrong and it just seems funny, right? Those kinds of things are the things we need to invite in and have people be willing to do in our lives. Here's the other thing. I think we actually need to filter out voices who have no desire to see you succeed. Now, here's what I mean by that. I mean that if we listen to too many of the wrong voices, it's going to point us in the wrong direction. I flippantly said earlier, if they have a book or a blog or a website, doesn't mean we need to listen to everything. And that's true. We need to filter through and say, who am I actually going to listen to? Here's the way I actually think about it. If they have a vested interest in you and where your life is going and your walk with Jesus, you should listen to them. You should 100%, if they say what they want to tell you, 100% listen to them. Filter out the other information, because we are inundated with voices, whether it's through books, podcasts, websites, YouTube videos, commercials, whatever it is, right? We get inundated with that stuff. Don't just take somebody's word and say, we're just going to allow everybody to shape who we are. Filter out the voices who have no desire to see you succeed in life or to see your marriage flourish or to see your relationship with Jesus flourish. And listen to the voices of the people that are around you who are vested in that. A good place to start with that is your family or your church family. Those people know you. Those people are connected with you. They know your background. They know your family life. They know who you are. They know what you're aiming for. They know what you want. Listen to those people and invite them to give feedback. Now, here's one point on how we give correction to other people. Here's how I would ask us to frame that. That we should lovingly express correction as an invitation to growth. It's very easy to just come down hard on somebody. Whether it's our own kids, it's an employee, it's a spouse, it's whatever. We can just very easily fall into the trap of, I'm just going to point out what you did wrong. Here's what I know, and I think many of us know and understand this, so I'm just going to say it so we can get it. We respond better, kids respond better, teammates, employees, even bosses respond better when we say, hey, I think there's something missing. I want to see you get to this place, and I think in order for you to get there, because I see the potential in you, you have to change this. We'll have this conversation all the time, whether I see it with kids I coach or it's my own kids or whatever. I'll say, hey, this is the place we need to get to. This is what needs to change now in order for us to get there. Now, I might say that differently depending on who I'm talking to, right? But the idea is we want to invite them to something bigger, not just tell them where they were wrong. Because we all know when people just show up and just tell us where we're wrong all the time, we don't listen to them. We will tune them out in a heartbeat, even if they're right, because they never help us understand where to go or how to get better. So when we are correcting people, whether it's our kids or anybody else, right, we lovingly express correction as an invitation to growth. It looks different from when they're 2 to when they're 12 to when they're 22. I get it. But how do I do that well? How do I come alongside people and do that? To wrap up our time, I want to go back to Proverbs 1 just for a minute, because we haven't looked at all these verses since then. I just want to think through this lens for a second, okay? So we're going to read Proverbs 1, verses 3 to 4, and verse 7. This is what verse 3 says. Their purpose, and he's talking about the Proverbs, right? So the Proverbs, all the things we've been talking about for these weeks. Their purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline, to help them understand the insights of the wise. Just think about that for a second. It says, I want people to understand wisdom. I want them to know what wisdom is, but I also want them to develop this discipline. We can know all the truth in the world, but if we don't put it into practice and we're not disciplined about it, it's not going to make any difference in our lives. And he says then, and I want them to help them understand the insights of the wise. It's all right there in that verse, that we would get the wisdom that's there, that we would be disciplined about it, and we would allow people that are wiser than us to have input. To say we don't live in a vacuum, but we want them to help us. And then it says this, their purpose, again, the Proverbs, is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives. See, when I said that people want us to be successful, I wasn't just saying that for me, I was saying that from this verse. That the desire of Proverbs is for us to actually live successful lives, to help them do what's right, just, and fair. Here's what I know, right? All of us would want to be people who are known for being right, just, and fair. All of us would want our kids to be people that are right, just, and fair. All of us want our employees or the people around us or our spouse or anybody. We would want to be people who are right, just, and fair. This is the roadmap. To take Proverbs, to know the wisdom, to be disciplined about it, and then to get input from others. And then verse 7 says this. This was the theme verse. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Listen, if you want to keep going in the wrong direction, if I wanted to keep going the wrong direction, I'd still be stuck in New Jersey. I don't want to be stuck in New Jersey. I don't know where you don't want to be stuck. But if we are foolish, we're going to keep following the path that we think is right when the real true wisdom is out there, and we're going to ignore all the signs that say go the other direction. Don't be foolish. Take the information that God has generously given us through Solomon and said, here you go. Thousands of years worth of wisdom at our fingertips that help us understand and know what's true and to live lives that are right and true and honor God. It's right there for us. We just have to be willing to put it into practice. Last two things to wrap us up. There's two things we want to land on. Number one, we have to fear God. We talked about this before, but it's just the idea that God is on the throne of our lives. We're not calling the shots. He's the one calling the shots. He's in charge. We recognize him as the boss. And we say, what you call me to, what you say to do, I'm going to follow it. He's the one. And then we love discipline. Sounds weird to say. None of us actively do this, or our instinct isn't to do this. But we love when we get pointed in the correct direction. We love when we're no longer on the wrong path. And when that means we're following Jesus, we actually take joy in that. So don't walk out of here, don't leave Proverbs behind. It's always there for you. It's always there. The knowledge and the wisdom is there. Be disciplined about what God calls us to, and then allow people that have more wisdom than us to invest, to give correction, to welcome that in, and then to put it to use in following Jesus.